Thank you very much, Dylan. Thank you for the invite. It's really nice to be able to join you this morning. I work as an independent design manager, which means that I get to work with lots of great small businesses on developing brands and services and designing products and things like that. So I do training and consultancy. So that is what I'm usually doing. But this morning, what I'm doing for you, having worked on some projects with you before as well around timber, I'm going to talk shortly for about, hopefully about no more than 30 minutes, hopefully, on marketing for woodworkers. So I'm going to do that. Let's just start with an agenda. So in terms of what we'll cover, I'm always very interested when I'm talking to people about sort of having a strategy, really. So I'm going to cover some main issues on having a kind of plan and how you create a sort of marketing plan. And then there's a couple of specifics which we've spoken about, just touching on. So I'll get towards those at the end, a little bit about imagery and pricing. But we'll kind of dive straight in. So marketing for me is in the same kind of bucket as all the branding and the sales and all of those sort of ways in which businesses kind of reach out towards their customers. And so to me, again, in very simple terms, there's kind of two main things that I'm always interested in people, first of all, just thinking about. So one is your business. So whoever you are, selling, and you've got your products in your woodworking products and services. So what is it that you're trying to achieve in your business? What is it that you're going to want to try and say to the world? And also, what is it that you're selling? So having all of those sort of basic things in house, a little bit like a sort of business plan, but just a sense of what you're doing with your business. But on the other side, on the right-hand side in this diagram, is obviously users and buyers. So that's all your customers. There's always different types of customers. Some people will end up being the people who will get your products in the very end, but there may be a different person who's actually buying. And you'll find that if you're selling gifts, for example, the person who buys it is not actually going to be the person who ends up with it. And if you sell into a stockist, a shop or something, then again, they may buy it from you, but again, they're going to sell it on. So there's going to be another end user. So customers, do come in a variation of kind of shapes and sizes. But the important thing is to always understand from their perspective, therefore, what is it that they want? What do they need to know? And ultimately, what do they value? Now, with any business at all, if your business plans and what you want to sell and what you want to say actually match what customers out there want and want to buy from you, then you will hit this spot in the middle where you will get a sale. So if those two things come together, and that's the space that you want to aim for, is that space in the middle. So if you just focus from your perspective, you can have amazing marketing materials. You can have the whizziest websites, the loveliest logos, the whole lot of it. If they don't actually work for your customers, if it's not what they like, if it's not what they want, if it's not got the information that they need, it's not going to work. So the users and buyers, their perspective is the real success point of any marketing campaign. Does it work for them? Not just does it work for you? So that's really important. I'm going to touch on that some more. But to go through and focus a little bit just on you and your business. So in terms of preparing yourself for a kind of marketing plan, I would suggest you consider two main things. So it's about what makes you good and what makes you special. So first of all, the sorts of things that will make you good are just the sort of basics really of doing business. What will make you viable? So are you producing good quality work? There's all sorts of different ways of doing quality. You might have, just sort of basic good quality for some things that you might want to sell. That's fine. Some people do, very high luxury goods, and that's a different level of quality, but that's fine. But whatever level of quality you're aiming for, make sure it fits. It's good enough quality. You need to be friendly and accessible. If people phone you, you've got to answer the phone. If they email you, you've got to reply to their emails, all that sort of basic stuff. If they buy something from you, you've got to deliver it and they've got to get it. And it's kind of got to represent and be what they thought that they were buying. And again, what you want is your customers at the end that they have purchased from you, and they are walking away thinking, yeah, that was, that was worth the money. You don't want people to walk away from a purchase thinking that they were ripped off, or that something was wrong, or they didn't get what they thought they were going to get. So that's the kind of basic stuff. You need to get your basics in house. These things are just about making you, say, a viable business. If you can't do these things, you'll go out of business. So these aren't the things to really focus on when you're marketing. The things to really focus on for a marketing plan is what makes you different, what makes you special. And there might be any number of things that you can think about that makes you more unique. So do you just have a unique design? Do you have a neat, unique shape, or a unique size, or a style of product? Have you got exceptional materials? I mean, obviously, if you're working in local timber, that is an exceptional material. And that should be something that you should be shouting about. Do you do something to make your customers especially happy? Not just normally happy, but, do you go above and beyond? Are you particularly easy or quick to work with? Or again, have you got a particular sort of ethos about how you work or why you set up your business? Is there something there that makes you special? And you don't have to have all of these things. These are kind of just some starting points to think about. But do give some time and thought to what makes you special compared to other people. And they are the things to really focus on that will give you, say, that unique selling point. And that's the things that are really good for marketing campaigns. So have a little think about, say, your own side of your business and what you might want to start telling the world about you that makes you different and will make you stand out from your competitors. On the users and buyers side, again, you need to think about, therefore, who are you reaching out to? Who is going to buy what you want to sell? And not only just buy it, not just kind of, anyone who kind of rocks up, but actually who's going to really value it? Who's going to connect with it? So again, think about who are the types of customers that are going to really suit your product that you think is a good match. But don't just think about customers. You can also might want to go for journalists or reviewers or press, because obviously that will be part of a good marketing campaign. So don't forget those people. You might want to target them with some of your own marketing. And again, if you're going to retailers and shops and other kind of trade buyers, again, remember that you will need to market to them. So think about the whole range. I always do say to people, beware friends and family when you're sort of thinking of who your customers are. Friends and family are great if you want to, when you first start and you want to sell stuff to them and they give you good feedback and all of that. That's fantastic. It's a nice thing to have, but don't rely on it. You need to get beyond your friends and family if you want to move from something that's not just a hobby and actually becomes a viable business. And so what you want to think about, I've got a couple of example pictures, which are, again, just examples to sort of talk through. So you've got to sort of think about, what type of people are your customers? Because they will be a certain type. You might be happy to take an order from whoever gets to your website or whoever comes through your door. But in terms of targeting your marketing, you need to think about the best people that you want to sell to. And again, coming back to think about what's important to them. What are they going to want from you? And try and put yourself in their shoes. So with these two photographs, again, just as an example, really. So for example, if you were selling, say, a handmade kitchen table to some homeowners, that's a very specific type of purchase. They'll be thinking about something to put in their own home, which will then be in their own home for 10 years, ideally more than that, ideally a lifetime. Ideally, a really good handmade kitchen table will stay in the family and even get handed down. So it's a really important purchase. It's a really personal purchase. It'll be right in their kitchen. So you can then start to think about your marketing and how you talk to them on that level and appreciate the sort of value of this purchase in their life, not just to you, but to them. But that will be very, very different to if you are selling to someone, for example, who owns a restaurant or owns an interior design shop, who wants to, if you're a restaurant owner, maybe you want to buy 10 tables or 15 tables. it'll still be what's called a considered purchase. That's still quite a big purchase, but they will be talking to you from a business perspective. So if you want to market to those type of people, you will talk in a slightly different way. They will want a different type of information. So this is just an example. You will have your own types of customers, but I would encourage anyone to draw some pictures or just get some sample images of, we sell to people who look like this, people who are these type of people, and they're looking for this type of thing. And it really helps you focus then on your customers when you're thinking about your marketing campaign. And then lastly, in terms of the sort of strategy, the other thing then is to decide what channels are you going to use to actually do your marketing on. And this is one of the areas that, there's so many channels out there now, particularly digital ones, that people do get a bit overwhelmed. If you love social media and you want to dive into all of it wholeheartedly, then, kind of knock yourself out and you can have a great fun. If that's not you, and you're sort of thinking, well, I need to do this, but I don't really know which channel's going to be best. Again, the starting point is, don't try and do them all. Try and think about the ones that your customers are using. So if your customers are on Facebook, use Facebook. If your customers are on Instagram, use Instagram. Just have a think about the main ones that are going to work for your customers. Again, it's a general rule of thumb, but there's lots of information out there about social media. And it is important these days, particularly this year. All of us who've been dealing with COVID, digital marketing is now really, really important. So you have to be doing something on social media. And it really is worth doing and getting to grips with if you haven't yet dived into it. But generally speaking, Facebook is a nice kind of notice board for sort of general public, and also smaller items. So lower price items potentially would be good to post those and market those through Facebook. Instagram, it's very image based. If you're going to go for interior designers and you want to get a network of other makers or other people who create things, Instagram can be quite good. You might find more of them on there. If you want business contacts, if you're talking to trade people or industry people, LinkedIn is where you do all the business. And then you can go for all of them now, TikTok, YouTube, all of those sorts of things. If you've got a very young market, then you probably want to be playing in those. And again, if you just enjoy them, you can have all sorts of fun on ones like that. So you can kind of knock yourself out if it's something that you do enjoy. Websites, again, you kind of have to have a website. These days you have to be communicating somehow, and you can use your website as your main point, your main shop front. Again, it's fantastic these days. Websites are really, really accessible. There's all sorts of places you can go, like Wix and Squarespace and Shopify. If you want to do e-commerce and you want to sell online, all of those they're relatively cheap. They start with templates, so they're relatively easy to use. You don't necessarily have to go to a professional website company to start using those. You might, depending on how big you are, if you've got a website and you want to be better, then I would encourage you to go and speak to a design agency that maybe can help you with that. But if you're just starting out, there's a lot that you can do yourself. And again, don't forget the good old traditional channels almost now. You can send emails out. You do email campaigns. Do be careful if you're getting email addresses by searching through the internet. Obviously, be mindful of the regulations around things like GDPR. You can't just sort of trawl people for emails, but you can go a long way to create your own email list. Good old phone calls, they work incredibly well. People like phone calls. It's very personal, it's very direct. And even posts, although the whole world is going digital, you might want to post something. If you've got lovely pieces of work that you've crafted, nice little sets of little postcards or a small little pamphlet or something printed, if that's something that your customers would want, or if you talk to a customer and it's something they can keep, again, don't count it out, even in this day and age when everything does seem to be going digital. And then one point just to make, if you are, say, particularly if you're starting afresh or you're looking at a whole kind of strategy for your marketing, if you're thinking about starting on Facebook and Instagram or starting a website, again, just have a think about whether or not you can get a consistent name across all of them. So check that you can buy a domain name. Check that if you want an account on Facebook, you can use that same name. Somebody hasn't already got it. Same on Instagram. If you sign in for an account, try and get the same name. So it's worth it, if you're just starting, to just test a few names and see if you can get them all. And you might need to adjust a name or kind of be a little bit more creative on a name to make that work, but it's worth it to have the consistency across all of your channels. It will make you look more professional. So a couple of specific areas. So we'll start on imagery. Imagery is so critical now, particularly on digital. We've all got phones that actually have fantastic quality cameras on them. Again, it's brilliant. You don't have to go to a professional photographer to get great images these days. But there are some sort of basic rules. I mean, the examples that I've got here are very well taken and probably professionally taken images. There's a huge, obviously, art to photography, and you can learn lots and lots, and you can dive into it if it's something you really enjoy. But just as a basic rule that I would encourage you to think about all the time if you're taking your own photographs is just the composition rule that's called the rule of thirds. So if you just think about when you're taking a photograph, imagine this grid, or some smartphones actually will show you a grid when you're taking a photo or when you're editing a photo on your phone. Our eyes, our brains, we like things when they have some symmetry to them. So if they're either particularly in the left hand or the right hand column, or they're central, and these kind of crosses that are illustrated in this left hand picture of the coffee cup, they tend to be the places where our eyes will land on a photograph. So if you want somebody to look at something specific, just compose it so what you want them to look at sits on one of those cross lines or just neatly fits in the composition. And I say these examples on this page are all kind of examples of nicely shot, well composed pictures, and hopefully you can kind of see what's coming across there. But sometimes we kind of learn the best when we look at things that maybe aren't such good examples. So I hope whoever took these photographs, I grabbed them off of Instagram. I hope they will forgive me for picking on them for not being fantastic examples. But again, these are kind of some of the typical mistakes which you can just overcome if you stop and you think a little bit when you're taking a photograph. So, don't just put something on the floor where you can see it. Think as well about what's in the background. So if we look at the ones on these top two, there's all sorts of other stuff going on in the background. They clearly haven't thought about it. To me, that takes away. It doesn't make them look particularly good quality pieces. It doesn't make them look like they took a lot of care and attention when they photographed them. The one on the top left is quite poorly lit. So again, it just looks dark. It doesn't show the piece off particularly well. So if you're trying to use that as some of your marketing, it's not going to do you the best job than if you get it somewhere that's slightly brighter and you just think about what's going on in the background. Same on the other two in the bottom. The bottom left, again, I think is a fantastic example of someone who has taken the time to put this chair outside in a nice kind of setting, which is lovely, but I can't see the chair, it's too far away. So again, if you want people to look at your item, get close to your item and let that fill the shot so people can actually see it. And lastly, bottom right, again, taking shots in kind of poor lighting or artificial lighting is tricky. You can see in this one that the lighting isn't consistent. I'm not quite sure where there's a dog in the bottom left-hand corner of that particular picture, which is supposed to be showing off the table. The dog's a bit of a distraction. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but I would question, I'm not sure why it's there. So again, it's just thinking about sort of basic rules when you hold up your phone. Think about the person, your customer, who's going to be looking at it. So is it at the right angle? Is there sort of funny light shadow going on, and can you improve that? Have you got anything going on in the background that you need to get rid of? Again, you just got a sort of nice composition. So that's the kind of, just good basics when you're coming to imagery. And then particularly for woodworkers, actually, also don't just think about your final products. It's not just a case of putting you know, your chair or your piece of furniture or your spoon or your bowl or whatever it might be, just in front of you and taking a straightforward shot. You know, this is my product. There's all sorts of lovely things that you can include in your imagery. So, you know, if you've got a nice workspace, if you're working in wood, then timber is a beautiful, beautiful material. If you're using local timber, you know, there'll be some lovely grain and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, take photos of your materials and your process. You know, do you do sketches? Have you got little maker's marks? Have you got little logos? You know, can you take pictures of yourself while you're making something? So this means as well, if you take imagery across all of these areas, what you will start to market is not just your product, but actually your whole story of who you are, why you make what you make, and how you make what you make, as well as the finished item. So it gives you a much rounder picture, and again will help make you really unique because it kind of tells your whole story. So move on to pricing. Pricing can seem a bit of a dark art, I think, even to quite experienced people when they're reviewing their pricing. So I'm just going to sort of, again, touch through some of the sort of main issues. So the examples that I've got here, if we look at the sort of 3 chairs, so we've got 3 chairs, 3, you know, all made of wood. You've got your kind of basic economy end at the IKEAs of this world. And you can buy, you know, a sort of nice looking designed wooden chair for 50 quid. And IKEA, again, are the absolute stars of the kind of global mass manufacturing of furniture, which is why they can produce a chair at £50, because they're producing hundreds of thousands off of a factory line production. But even again, in commercial production, other companies like Ercol, who are higher quality, they're still, again, producing a wooden chair. And the reality is that people out there, you know, in the land of customers, there will be some people out there who, just from the sort of untrained eye, won't necessarily automatically understand why is one of those chairs for over £400 and why is one £50. So to some people, they will look the same. But obviously to people buying Ercol and recognizing the quality difference, they then are people who are prepared to pay £400 for a chair. So again, there'll be different types of people. And then, you know, again, an example of a Welsh stick chair down at the bottom, you know, lovely piece made by Mike Venables, you know, a beautiful handcrafted bespoke Welsh stick chair is going to cost you over £1,000. So again, there's a different type of market. And if you're making those types of chairs, you are not competing with the IKEAs of this world, and you shouldn't try to compete with the IKEAs of this world. You're producing a totally different product, and your pricing has to reflect you. And the same, you know, on the right-hand side with a couple of examples of different wooden spoons. You know, we've got one made in North Wales by the Whitlings, you know, at £35. And then you get others on Etsy for £18. And again, you might look at them and you could think, oh, well, I'm going to sell spoons. And look, this, you know, there's this other guy, he's selling them for £35. So I'm going to sell mine for £35 as well. Why, you know, why wouldn't I? I'm going to put them at the highest price. But again, David White, who sells at the Whitlings, which is that example, he has a very bespoke market. He sells quite exclusive items. He sells to restaurant owners. So he's worked really hard to get his position, his pricing at a certain market, which is different to the Etsy market. And here as well is a good example of a photograph of the spoons in the bottom. Even the way they photograph them kind of looks like, well, here's a spoon, but we've got a whole bunch of them. There's a whole box of them, and you can have one of them for £18. Whereas the image of the spoon in the top is just showing you one very beautifully placed spoon that clearly is saying this spoon is very, very special, and that is why you're going to pay £35 for this one. So it's, again, it comes back to pricing. Before you sort of look at it, think about who you're competing with and what else is out there. And so how do you compare? But make sure you're comparing yourself to a similar type of seller. You know, don't try and sell, if you're making stuff at home, don't try and compare yourself to IKEA. It's got nothing to do with that. And that would just be, you know, kind of crazy and impossible to do. So you do want prices, that allow you profit as well. That's the other aspect. You know, if you think that you want to compete with the spoons on Etsy, and therefore you're going to price them at £18, but if you can't make any profit at that, then it's the wrong price for you. You won't be in business for very long if you don't have any profits. And again, it's prices that really reflect your value and your craftsmanship and your time and all that sort of stuff as well. It's not just the finished item that's sort of sitting there and is the only consideration when you're thinking about pricing. As well, again, you might have a set of products which you just make and then you sell, and you make them in batches. And if people want to buy one, you can put a photograph of it on a website and you can stick a price on it. So it's a fixed price and it's a fixed item, and you just continue to make them like a little sort of small batch production line. Whereas you might have other items that you make that are different each time. And a customer might come to you and say, can you make something like this for me? Which is much more a bespoke design service then. And then each pricing has to be set for each project as you go along. So again, it's a very different way of looking at pricing. So again, think about the way that you work, who you compare to, and all of those factors when you're considering pricing. And then a little bit on markups, just as we come towards the end. So again, prices and markups, they vary in each market. So it's never a sort of hard, fast calculation to be done. But when you're thinking about pricing, do consider that there is, you know, generally there are these three prices that you need to think about. So is your unit cost. There's then potentially a trade price. So if you sold these in bulk, then what would that be? And then a retail price. So if it was sitting in a shop, or if you were selling just one item directly to a customer, what would that price be and how would it differ? Again, bear in mind, unit costs. How much does it cost you to make an item? Do make sure that you include everything when you're thinking about that figure. So it's not just your materials. You might have insurance, you might have rent that you're paying for a workshop, there's transport costs, there's also your time to make items and to design items and to just run your business as well. So do make sure that you think about all of the costs. Don't just undersell your unit cost. So one way of then thinking about coming up with a price for your market is to start with that unit cost. So if you can make an item and it costs you £20 to make it, well, if you sold them to a trade buyer in bulk, well, how much would you add onto that price in order that you can make a reasonable profit? You know, would you add 50%? Would you double it? Would you add 100%? Do you know, is it more? Is it less? I mean, what would be acceptable to your trade buyer, and how much profit do you want to make? And how much, you know, does the sector and the market that you're selling into, how much does it tolerate really? How, you know, how much markup can you add? And again, if you're going to sell to trade, then how much more are they going to want to add on top of their markup so that they can make a profit? So that when it does end up in a shop front, how much is it actually going to retail at? So you've got to sort of build in these layers of pricing so that you can make a profit and potentially a trade buyer can make a profit. And then you can think about what it ends up when it's staring at a public buyer on your website or in a shop. That's one way to do it. The other way is to work backwards. So think about the price that you think your goods need to be priced at if they're going to be in a shop, or if you're going to be selling them direct on your website. How much do you want to sell it for? And then start thinking, well, that's if I sold one. If someone came and asked me and said they wanted to buy 20, well, what would my discount trade price be? And how much can I tolerate? And then if I have that discounted price for 20 or a bigger batch, actually, if I then go back to my unit cost, can I still make a profit? Is that going to be okay? So say you can do these calculations in these two different ways, and this is a kind of rough way of thinking, but you do need to build in some margins. If you just think to yourself, well, this item cost me £20 to make, and well, you know, I'll add kind of like 10%, and I'll add a small markup, and that's my profit. You are going to really restrict yourself if, say, a trade buyer comes along or someone wants to negotiate, because you've sort of stuck your public price with very little margin on it. And it just gives you much less opportunity to be flexible. And it will mean ultimately that you've got much less chance to actually make a profit. And if you can't make profit, it's not about being greedy, but if you can't make profit, you'll go out of business. So you do need to think about profits. Just to finish up on three little common misunderstandings, particularly related to pricing. Some people say to me, well, you know, our marketing, the way we're going to sell to everyone is, well, we'll be the cheapest. And if we're the cheapest, then everyone will come and choose us. But that isn't actually necessarily the case. So I would think about that very seriously before you go down that route as part of your marketing and pricing. Do you want to sell to people who actually their main criteria for buying something is that they're looking for the cheapest? Particularly if you're making something by hand, it's in a great material like local wood, actually you probably need to be looking for people who want to buy good quality. So going for cheap, it can be a bit of a downward spiral, and there'll potentially always be someone else who will then undercut you, and you'll always be getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And you want to actually be selling and pricing yourself based on quality and the perception of your quality, and the prices that your customers expect to pay, and actually match their needs and their sense of value. So don't necessarily go for cheap. Especially when people start as well, they'll say to me, well, you know, we're going to start on a special offer. And then when people have started buying our stuff, that'll be fine. That'll get us going. And then we'll put our prices up later when we know that people want it. Again, I would just say to you, beware of that as a starting strategy. You could just be basically telling the world that you're discounting before you've even started. So you're underselling yourself, you're undercutting yourself from the word go. And the other thing in this thinking is that, well, what happens when you do decide that you want to put your prices up? That might look quite strange, and you might then have customers that have bought from you before and are suddenly getting a bit miffed because you've hoiked your prices up and they don't understand why. So do your pricing properly, and even at the very beginning, go out there properly and test your market with a proper price that reflects your value and allows you to make profit, and stick with it. Be confident about that and go out into the world on that basis. And then you can see whether or not, you know, people want to buy, and then you're getting genuine feedback about whether your pricing is working. And then lastly as well, people also say, when we talk about trade pricing and retail pricing, well, you know, I'll sell direct to people because if I sell direct, then I get to keep all the profit off a retail price. Whereas if I go to trade, you know, I have to give them a trade discount. So we're going to sell direct because there's more profit in it. That would be great. But again, do remember, if you sell direct to people, then you might only sell one item to one person. And once they've bought from you, they may not come back again, because then they've got their table or they've got their spoon and they don't need another one. If you sell to trade buyers, they are not just potentially going to buy one, they might buy 10 or 20 or 50. And if they are themselves a stockist or a reseller, they might come back to you and they might buy 20 from you 3 times a year or 50 from you 3 times a year. You won't make as much profit on each individual item, but that potentially is a much more lucrative customer for you. And you're dealing with one customer to potentially sell 50 or 150 items in a year. If you just sell direct and you want to sell 50 or 150, you've got to find 50 or 150 individual customers, which means you've got to do a lot more marketing. You'll also be doing a lot more packaging, a lot more, you know, going up to the post office or sorting out your delivery drivers. So it takes a lot more effort to sell direct. So there is more profit, but it can cost you more money. So again, just think carefully about when you are deciding whether or not to target direct sales or trade sales. And then, so just to recap again, take us back to the beginning really. When you're doing your marketing plans, say match the sense between what you want to do and have a plan and think that through, but match it with the customers that you want to target and what they need. If you get those two things to match, that's how you will get your sale. So do great marketing that targets your customers. And that's why I finished on this final little quote, which I'm completely believe in as well. Good marketing will make you look good, and that's great. But fantastic, really good marketing will connect with the customer and make them feel ultimately that they made a really smart choice when they've bought from you. And if customers think that, they will then recommend you, or they will come back again. And if you can get customers doing that, then they are doing the marketing for you, and you really are starting to get your marketing to work really, really well. So that is what I will finish on. I hope that was useful to you all on the subject of marketing. Thank you very much for listening to this, just over 30 minutes, actually. I do apologize